All right, hold on. There we go. All right. Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I have a really cool guest on today who's full of knowledge. Jacy Ippolito. Did I say your last name correctly?
Absolutely. Yes. Good
Okay,
morning.
awesome. Good morning. So, we use right before this, we started recording. We started kind of geeking out about lots of different things. So, hopefully, you're going to get a ton out of this episode. Before we jump in, first of all, I wanted to welcome you to the show, JC.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, I would love you to share with everyone what's been your journey with education, coaching, leadership, what you do now. I'd love them to hear all of your amazing accomplishments.
Well, I was born on a rainy Saturday. No, um, I kind of backed my way into education. I originally was, thinking down the road about psychology and neuroscience and cognitive science and all of that. And late in my college career, a wonderful advisor, Nancy King, said, have you ever thought about becoming a reading specialist? Because I was very interested in kids' cognition and early literacy from a brain standpoint. And I ended up going off and getting a master's as a reading specialist and working my way into education that way. From being a reading specialist, then I was tapped at some point to becoming a literacy coach in Cambridge Public Schools here in Massachusetts. And that really began my journey thinking about school level leadership, right? And how coaches are informal leaders in their buildings, in their districts, and that's really the journey that brought me into my doctoral studies and then to becoming a professor at Salem State University in the McEwen School of Education. Now
I
I
love it.
co-direct programs in educational leadership, which we prepare formal principals, assistant principals, as well as teacher leaders and coaches. And I'm also the co-director of the Center for Educational Leadership at Salem State with my colleague, Dr. Megan Charner Laird. We do a ton of work together running those programs in the center and, of course, writing.
Mhm. I love it. Yes. And so you've written a bunch of books.
A few, yes.
And we're going to talk about one specifically today. And we're going to talk about another one at a later date, which I'm excited because they're both about coaching. And my beautiful listeners are going to get a ton out of both of them. So I want to jump into our conversation today because we're going to talk about a couple things that are very related, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is why coaches and leaders go it alone. Like why are they so isolated, right? Like why is this happening? What's the impact of this happening? And then we're going to talk about kind of how do we not do that within our schools?
Absolutely. Yes. It's something certainly I felt as a coach. I think there is this pervasive kind of myth of the heroic leader. I think, particularly in the United States, it's kind of cultural. You see it in the movies all the time, the movies we probably grew up with, where, whether it's Die Hard or Rambo, or, it's where the single mythic hero
Mhm,
saves the day. And that just isn't really the case in education, right? It's
mhm,
always collaborative. It's always a team effort. One of my kind of mentors and favorite principals years ago said some version of, I never try to make a decision alone. If I find myself making a decision alone, I know that that's, a mistake, right? That it needs to be collaborative. It needs to be community focused and have community involvement in kind of big decisions. And so I think certainly in our preparation program for new leaders in our Center for Ed Leadership, one of our tenets is, collaborative work strengthens the entire enterprise. And I think for coaches in particular, there can be this neither fish nor fowl feeling, right? You're not a formal building leader necessarily. You're not a classroom teacher. Those are the two roles in schools we grew
mhm.
up seeing as
Right.
students, right? And so we don't have as good of a template for what coaches look like as leaders in schools. Even though the research I've done with Dr. Rita Bean and Alison Swan Dagan and Diane Kern, of interviewing principals, interviewing coaches around the country, they all say that collaboration is key, and yet sometimes I think there is again that heroic myth that prevents us from kind of reaching out and saying maybe showing a little vulnerability and saying, I'm not quite sure which way to go with our new literacy curriculum. Maybe a principal approaching a coach, or I'm not, I'm not so sure what the best, coaching calendar is going to be for this year. And so we always, in all of our work, encourage formal and informal leaders to be meeting regularly, be collaborating on these really important decisions. Right now across the country, there's lots of curricular changes happening, particularly in early
Lots.
literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
districts where you see a single leader, whether that be a coach, a principal, a district leader, kind of, picking a curricula, and saying, oh, this one, it just doesn't go as well, right, as forming a design team, having coaches, specialists, teachers, leaders sitting together and reviewing curricula and saying, what's going to be best for our students, our school, our context.
Yeah, yeah. So, and there's a big impact to coaches and leaders going it alone, doing it alone, right? There's an impact on well-being, there's an impact on effectiveness.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the stress, eh, the age of social media we live in too, it's all too easy to kind of point a finger at a single individual. Well, they chose
Mhm,
this, right? They made this
mhm,
decision. So, um, one of the things we do through our Center for Educational Leadership at Salem State is provide professional learning communities for coaches, for
mhm,
school leaders, for cross role, cross district, ongoing, communication. And the power of those professional learning communities is really being able to um, put your cards on the table and
mhm,
say to a trusted group who you meet with over time, here's what I'm wrestling with. Last year, in our groups, one of the burning questions was how to support LGBTQ, transgender students and families in the community. And that was a topic that oftentimes leaders feel very shy about kind of talking with
mhm,
colleagues, with communities about. And so, in the kind of trusted small group of cross district leaders, you can have those conversations. What are you doing in your district? What are you doing? How did this
mhm,
go? We talk about those groups as giving leaders at all levels the courage to kind of do what they might think is right, test out their ideas with trusted others first before going public.
mm. I love it. And the community you have at Salem State University is that locally, like, is it only for folks that live there physically in person, or is there a virtual component that folks that don't live there can also join?
Yeah, great question. It really began kind of locally and regionally, and now has grown. We do
Mhm,
almost all of our professional learning communities. We have fully online virtual options, so it really
mhm,
can be a national audience. And we
mhm,
last year we had principals, coming in from the Midwest. We had one coming in from Bogota, Colombia. Certainly our alumni network takes advantage and uses those groups quite widely, but they're really open to everyone.
Great, great. Because I was listening, I was like, "Ooh, my folks might be really interested in this
Oh
community,
yeah,
and do they have access?"
yeah. Stay tuned. We're looking for coaches across the country to join some groups as well to talk about coaching. So this would be a good opportunity for sure.
So we'll put the link. You'll send me all the links for this stuff. We'll put them in the show notes so people can grab them and check out what so it's a coaching learning community and a school leader learning
Exactly.
community. Okay, beautiful. Okay, I love this so much. One of the things I was talking to a superintendent the other day, and he said, when I was a superintendent, my first year, I just called all my superintendent friends and said, what do you do? And you talk about feeling isolated, right? This is the one person in a district, like you got one,
Yeah,
right? And he was like, I
exactly.
said, that was great, right? And I think sometimes I see leaders, right, school leaders, district leaders, that naturally don't have any they're like naturally reach out, right? There's like create their community if one's not created. And then there's a larger subset of folks, like many more people that I work with that don't reach out for multiple reasons, and then I think there's like a psychological component to this around like, I don't want to look bad. I don't want to look stupid. I want to look like I know what I'm doing in my role, that I deserve to have this role. There's gosh, I've worked with some leaders and they're like, I feel like I have to prove that I belong at the table.
Right, right, absolutely. Rita Bean and I talk about it in our books as the expert trap, right? That when you
Mhm,
become a school leader or you become an instructional coach, particularly superintendent, everyone's looking to you often for
Mhm,
answers. It's not just leaders who have that heroic myth in their head, right? It's the whole
mhm,
community, and so there's this tendency to turn to those leaders and say, "Okay, save us. You have
mhm,
the answer. You're the expert."
mhm,
And particularly for coaches and building leaders, Rita and I talk about, your real expertise is in being able to bring people together and facilitating the conversation, right? Bringing
mhm,
together an instructional leadership team at a building level and saying, okay, we have grade level representation from every corner of the school. Here's the big decision that's on the table, right?
mhm,
We're looking for a new curricula. Let's pull together and figure out how we want to do this. So I always try to reframe that expertise as a facilitative expertise. Not that
mhm.
you as the leader or the coach have every answer to every
Mhm,
question.
mhm. I love that. And then one of the contexts I have as a coach is I'm not a content expert, I'm a strategist. And I think that goes even just with the content of leadership, right? Like, I don't claim to know everything about leadership. One, I have a great skill of figuring things out. Let me figure it out. I don't know. Let me go find some answers. I'll come back, right? And that's a friend of
Totally.
mine says, Becca, my favorite thing about you is your ability to figure things out. And that's right. I'm not go right. I'm not go I love that term, the expert trap, because that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes, as a coach and a consulting coach, I say I'm your research librarian. So,
Mhm,
use me wisely. Tell me, what articles, what books, what topics you're interested in, and I'll show up
mhm,
next time with everything you might want. Sometimes oftentimes I think teachers, coaches, leaders at all levels are so pressed for time that
mm,
having someone like a coach either in the building or as a district or outside coach to kind of say, oh, I have a little headspace, I can think about that on your behalf. It can be really
mhm.
powerful. And I
Yeah.
think principals in particular, our study of principals across Pennsylvania, over 100 principals, really talked about their um, reliance on instructional coaches to be those kind of in-house experts.
Mm.
We did a small study across the pandemic of coaches, and the phrase that always comes to my mind there is life-saving device. Coaches were kind of life-saving devices, tools during
Mhm,
that time as we were transitioning to teaching fully online or hybrid.
mhm,
Coaches were working 24/7 to
mhm.
support teachers and leaders during that time.
Yeah, for sure. It makes me think of this topic. I'm doing some school turnaround work in Phoenix, and I'm coaching high school teachers in alternative high schools. And I tell them, I said, about half the time, I'm not smarter than a fifth grader. I don't know your content. I'm sitting here learning too. I've learned a lot about World War II lately. It's really great. Let me tell you about Hitler. I don't know. So what's great is first of all, I tell them, I'm like right out the gate, I'm not your content expert and I'm not here to be that. I'm here to help strategize how best to teach children, right? And it's like really owning it. Like there's no part of me that I think in my very early like first and second years of coaching, I was really like, I can't tell them, they can't know that I don't know this thing. And now it's very freeing and it builds credibility. It's like, oh, she and she's not here to tell me about history. They are the content expert, not me. And it builds trust for me to say that.
Absolutely, absolutely. My colleagues, Megan Chunner-Laird and Christina Dobbs, have worked for years around this idea of disciplinary literacy.
Mm,
Really digging into the particulars of reading, writing, thinking, like historians, like scientists, like mathematicians. And when I first started coaching, I was coaching across content areas, and we talk about in our disciplinary literacy inquiry and instruction book about you don't have to be the kind of deep content expert necessarily. What you're doing is harnessing the power of the content expertise of the teachers,
yeah.
but you as the coach, you're kind of encouraging them to be thought partners with you and engage in
Exactly.
what we call collaborative inquiry. So,
Yeah.
what would it look like to help your
Mhm.
students really, write like biologists? How does a biologist kind of communicate specialized knowledge in their discipline? Let's kind of think about that together and then design instructional activities that help students kind of get closer to that. So the magic there is not in the coach coming and saying, here's the perfect warm up or do now or vocabulary activity. It's really in the co-creation of that knowledge with teachers and kids together.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So I want to shift this. So there's a big impact in schools and the ecosystems and context of schools when our coaches and leaders do go it alone, right? So when they are feeling isolated and isolating themselves for
Right.
whatever reason, there's an impact on student outcomes.
Absolutely. And I think if we look through the lens of coaching, you can see that really clearly, right?
Mhm,
In Rita Beans in my book that came out earlier this year, The Power of Instructional Coaching in Context, the whole
mhm,
idea of that book is that student outcomes and coaches supporting teachers, none of that really works as well if the surrounding context of the school and district is not supportive, right? So if there is not alignment between the content that teachers are trying to work on with students, the coaching program and its routines and all the coaching kind of work that's going on isn't keyed to that. And then if leaders aren't kind of championing the coaches, sharing calendars, pointing teachers back to the coach, really meeting with the coach regularly to kind of support, um, all that time with teachers, or if the leaders are pulling coaches into other activities that are
mhm,
take them away from coaching, uh, you just don't see as much success, right? So we're really trying to reframe the success of coaching and teaching not as the individual efforts of one teacher or one coach, right, but as the systems approach, right? Thinking about the alignment and success of the entire system for improving teaching and learning.
yeah, I love this. I was coaching a coach, gosh, it was a couple days ago, and she was talking about having beginning conversations with teachers, and she said, "Becca, what do you think I should say?" And
Protocol?
it's so funny. I like don't believe in protocols. I know this is maybe a scandalous thing to say in the
We're gonna have to
coaching
have a
world.
fight. I love protocols. No.
Oh, we should. That would be such an interesting debate. I'm open to shifting my view on it, anyway, my so all that to say, I was like, let me think about it, and so I don't have a protocol for what my first
Sure.
conversation has, and one thing that I at the beginning, right? So sometimes our first conversations are very informal. Hi, how's it going? What do you need? Right? What are you interested in? Goodbye. And then maybe our next one. But in the first conversations, when we talk about goal setting,
Mhm.
one of the things I told her was you want to align your coaching goals to the school and district goals.
Yes.
You all of us, alignment, coherency, all of us want to be headed in the same direction. We are in the same stream going towards the same direction. I'm not over here doing my thing as a coach. And I think sometimes we talk about like teacher agency, right? Like teachers choosing their goals. Yes, we do want teachers to feel that they have freedom and agency around their goal setting within the context of the school's goals.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rita and I talk a lot about how, um, if teachers are receiving mixed messages, the coach is kind of saying one thing, the building principal, who's the formal supervisor evaluator, saying a different thing, that creates a real cognitive dissonance for teachers, right? Well, wait a second, which direction should I be running in, right? And
Yep.
so it's one of the primary reasons we say coaches and school leaders have to be on the same page
Hmm. Hmm.
to be supporting teachers in a really robust way, right? So there
Hmm.
is that kind of alignment across the whole system.
Yeah, yeah. I think an example, I was doing some STEM rollout work in a district, and it was this so the first year's like, we love STEM, we want to do this. And then the second year is like, well, you have a new reading and math curriculum. And right. So it's
Much on the
it's
plate. Yeah, right.
oh, right. So how do we have STEM fit into all of this, right? And not have folks feel like this is three huge things on their plate. And what we ended up doing is saying, let's focus on discourse, the
Right.
discourse part of a STEM disposition, a STEM skill, right? And it's been beautiful. It has taken flight and momentum
Wonderful.
because we aligned that STEM work with those new curriculums to empower them. But it had to happen because if we held tight, like we have to STEM, is its own thing. I almost promise you it would have fallen off and been just another year-long trend that we tried and didn't work.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think the key conversation for coaches and principals, in particular, to have at the beginning of every year is what's our focus this year? I
Mm,
mean, we have to do it all the time.
mhm,
We
mhm,
can't really kind of drop anything like, oh, we're not going to do math this year. No, no, that's not possible.
mhm,
But what's our focus across content areas, across
mhm,
grade levels, as a
mhm,
building, as a community? And discourse is a great one. Sometimes it's we choose things like vocabulary, or we choose um, writing as a focus for the year. How are we really across all the corners that we're kind of looking at, really supporting robust writing for students? And to add that focus to the year, I think gives all the adults in the building, an opportunity to kind of align their thinking and work and improve that one kind of corner, right? And then the next year you choose a different focus, and it's iterative over the years.
And I think, when I think about types of focuses, and I've been, it's so interesting because it could be a content focus, like writing. It
Right.
could be, I don't know, soft skill focus, like we're working on collaboration
The
this year,
SEL skills, right? Yeah.
SEL skills. And it could be a kind of a more of a pedagogical focus, like engagement.
Yes.
Which is very, very broad. And if you do engagement, define engagement. Do not assume everyone has the same definition of engagement. But there's lots of different, and it could be schools have our beautiful schools love acronyms. So like roar is our because we're the lions, right? Or that, they have, so maybe
Right.
you focus on what that acronym is, right? What's a thing that we constantly say? Like what we talk about and what we put attention on grows. So if we're already putting our attention on that, let's have our coaching aligned with that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's one of the questions I always ask working with coaches, particularly in a discipline in a district. Say, what are the three, give or take, could be four, but
Mhm,
no
mhm,
more than four, right? Things that
mhm.
you really are looking for this year as
Yeah.
you're kind of doing classroom walkthroughs, as you're doing observations. Okay, great. And coaches often can name, okay, here are the three or four things I'm looking for. Okay, now have you gone public with those 3 or 4 things? Did the
Yes,
teacher know those
yes.
were the focal areas? Does the
Mhm.
principal, do the district coordinators and
Right.
supervisors? So, that, public kind of announcement and agreement that here's our
Mhm,
focus for the
mhm,
year or for a set
mhm.
period of time, right, for a certain cycle, is really powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that, right? Going public, the teachers knowing, hey, as a school, we're focusing on this, and I'm going to be setting goals that align with this thing. So the walkthroughs are looking for the same thing. And we're not, I tell my coaches all the time, you're not looking for everything. When you're in a classroom, you're not if you are walking into classrooms observing just everything, there's a problem. We want to choose focuses or a
Absolutely.
focus, focuses.
Well, and then when you make that choice, it allows districts, it allows coaches, it allows curriculum directors, coordinators to do professional learning around those focal areas. So, okay,
Mhm,
great. We're
mhm,
choosing discourse as a focus. Great. Our PD cycle is now going to be focused on that as well. We're going to be looking at texts and articles that zoom in on that. So, it really does. As we're increasingly trying to encourage people to take that systems view,
mhm.
uh, that focus gives the entire system energy.
I love that. I love frameworks. I love frameworks.
Same.
Do you have any frameworks in your book, the instructional coaching in context
Oh, sure.
book around that systems view so we can fit it
Yeah.
into something?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely the framework for the whole book that is kind of a bullseye, where it's kind of content, coaching, and context, and kind of how those three rings really relate to each other. But I'll lift up one other, which is really something Rita Bean's been working on for years. I really want to give her credit. Something she and I have tweaked is something called the levels of intensity in coaching, which is a three-level kind of chart framework. And it moves from a first column of kind of, building relationships and kind of getting to know teachers, getting to know students, and all the coaching activities that are associated with that. The trick is a number of coaches end up kind of getting stuck in that first column, right? You're kind of perennially building the relationships, getting to know people, getting to know the students. Maybe you get kind of drawn into kind of taking on some student groups, and you kind of never escape that inertia. The second column is really about analyzing practice. And so you can feel how that's a little more intense.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're really looking at data, you're looking at student work, you're sitting down with teachers on a regular basis to kind of observe and provide a little feedback. So it's a little more risky, right? But it is also going to help practice, shift. The third column is about transforming practice, right? So that one's the deep end, and it really, that's where, I say you are using some protocols or some routines, whether it's deep coaching cycles, whatever routines you're setting up as a coach, to really collaboratively dig into the ways in which shifting practice makes differences for student outcomes. So, we use that framework with coaches to kind of plan their year. How are they going to slowly move from building relationships to analyzing practice to transforming practice? We use it as a conversation tool between coaches and principals. How do you make sure that the coaches in your building, in your district, are not getting stuck in that first column and are moving towards analyzing and transforming practice over time? One of the secrets to making that movement is having that partnership with the principal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
a principal, when meeting with teachers, can say, "Oh, if you're thinking about that, you really should meet with the coach and set up some time," so that all roads are kind of leading back to that coaching partnership. That's a framework we found very helpful because it also prompts coaches to create some coaching menus of service where they can kind of look at those levels of intensity and then think about, how can I create a menu of options for teachers that allows them to kind of enter into coaching at all different places, but ultimately, follow that trajectory from building relationships all the way to transforming practice.
I love this. And I just highly recommend everyone listening, like grab this book, learn how to shift. I'd love to hear from you. Can you give one or two distinctions between that kind of starting to initiate change and reflect and analyze on change, and then, having transformative coaching conversations? Like what would shift from that, the adopting change, to really sustained transformative change?
Yeah, it's a great question. How much time do we have? No,
I know, I know those a big one. I would just, I'm like, ooh, like what else is in there? One or two things
yeah,
that our
yeah.
listeners could walk away with.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the big ones for us is thinking about coaching language. And so, we have a piece in the book about language routines that
Mhm,
coaches use, and moving from kind of observational and descriptive language, which is great
mhm,
when you're building relationships, right? Like,
yep,
oh, I'm just another set of eyes in the classroom. I see
mhm,
this, I noticed that. Tell me more about, you know, why you're introducing these vocabulary words at the beginning of the lesson.
mm,
So it's really kind of a seeking to understand, it's a
mhm,
building relationship kind of series of language routines, all the way to more kind of questioning and kind of probing kind of language routines, where as a coach you're really trying to, I don't want to say disrupt necessarily, but you're trying to
mhm,
kind of nudge the teacher into being very reflective about
mm,
their purposes, and are the instructional activities they're engaging in
mm,
really the most effective for achieving their purpose, and so trying to draw that purpose out in a
mm,
conversation, um, and highlighting for the teacher almost in a mirror like kind of way, like, okay, your purpose was to use these stations around the room in an elementary science lesson, right, to kind of lift up and highlight certain vocabulary words and science and certain concepts. Do you feel like, the lesson we just did you achieve that purpose? Or, what in your mind might have been some things that kind of disrupted? Oh, well, I sent the kids off to the stations and I didn't quite have the materials ready, or I didn't, so getting the teacher to kind of reflect on those, uh, high leverage moves they might have made or maybe missed an opportunity for. I think that movement over time is really transformative for practice.
for sure. We're teaching people how to think differently, analyze their own thoughts, right? Be reflective. I might, I'm gonna say a statement, and I might be oversimplifying this, so please correct me if I'm like, you're like, Becca, that you oversimplified it. I'm curious if that kind of first adopting change level, right? We shift from, building relationships, trust, all of that, right?
Right.
And we're talking about just starting to adopt some change. Am
Right.
I using kind of language that accurately describes that level, or or is there better language I should be using?
Well, we like the language of kind of analyzing yeah, analysis, I guess I'll say.
Analysis. Okay,
Be- But
that first that level.
yeah, because it puts
Okay.
both coaches and teachers, I think, into that kind of design
Okay.
mindset,
Cool.
right?
Cool, cool, cool.
Teachers and coaches are designers. They're
Yeah.
designers of instruction and learning activities for students. And
Mhm.
so it really is a cyclical kind of process of looking at the output students are producing and saying, is that
Yeah.
the output that we wanted? Okay, what could
Mhm.
I tweak in my practice? So I'm
Mhm.
analyzing both the student work, I'm analyzing my practice, looking at the
Yep.
relationship between it, and then saying, what changes can I make or have I made, and what changes does that result in for students?
Mhm.
Um, One of my own kids, preschool teachers, used to just like every day, 1,000 times a day, go, "I'm so curious about that." Why, like she just
Mhm.
led with curiosity,
Mhm.
and for years my kids have, that's language they've adopted. They're like, "I'm so curious about that." It's almost the Ted Lasso, I think.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
be curious, and
Yeah.
um, I think that second phase of the levels of intensity there, that analysis, analyzing practice, it's about curiosity. It's about,
Mhm.
it's about getting away from fear of, am I
Mhm.
doing it right? I don't want to
Mhm.
be vulnerable with the coach or with other teachers and saying, I'm not perfect at this. It's letting go of those feelings and instead
Mhm.
being really curious about what students are doing as a result of my instruction. And once you
Yeah.
get into the curiosity space, I think it's a hop, skip, and a jump to transforming practice.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm curious now that analyzing stage of levels of intensity, is that more of the like what is happening? We're analyzing what is happening, and then the transforming stage is why it's happening.
Yes, and I think the transforming is about piloting new practices, right? The
Okay.
transforming is really about, okay, we've analyzed, we've tried to describe, we've tried to
Hmm.
understand,
Hmm.
uh, and now we're really gonna, as one of our principals said in one of our other book, The Uncommon Theory of School Change, we're gonna walk out on air. We're gonna try something new that we haven't tried before, and it's gonna be a little risky. It's gonna feel a little uncomfortable, but we're gonna see what might happen if I shift, a vocabulary routine that I've always had and I've always loved, but maybe isn't, the most high leverage or effective routine, right? I'm still not seeing the results I want. I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to hopefully try it in community, right? That's where, that third column, the transforming practice, really is all about collaborative inquiry. Think lesson study, think, really saying, I'm going to hold myself accountable, not to the coach, not to the principal, but really to my peers, the classroom teachers to the left and right of me. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to try this today. Let's see how it goes, and I'm going to report back. And if it goes well, we should all try this, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe we all give it a try together and come back and report, how it went. That kind of lesson study idea again.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And supporting being messy, making mistakes, taking risks, right? That growth mindset
Exactly.
culture where we don't have to be perfect.
We're
Do it
very
right the
worried about
first
that,
time.
aren't we? Yes.
I love it. Okay, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you from left field, and you have no idea that I'm gonna ask you this question. So to wrap up, I would love to hear from you. So something that I've been really focusing on in my own work, and I'm writing a book about it,
Oh, wonderful.
is resistance to change.
Ah,
And so I'm curious, and in all of this like coaching and context,
mhm.
where does resistance to change fit in? What are your thoughts around reducing resistance to change, even why it happens?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, great question. I think a question that's always on coach's mind. It's always on my
Mhm.
mind as a coach. Rita Bean and I talk a lot about this. We write about this in our books. We really over time have come to view resistance not as an individual issue, right? So, I mean, first of all, yes, an individual can, be experiencing kind of hardships at home or hardship at work. You never kind of know what might be going on with an individual. So first of all, again, you have to be curious. If someone is quote unquote resistant to coaching or change, you have to step back and say, what's the root of that
Mhm.
resistance or reluctance? uh, don't take it personal, right? So
Mhm,
often I think as coaches we want to say, oh, it's something about me. What Probably not actually.
mhm,
And so that's where we really start to think about reluctance or resistance as a systems level dilemma. It's a culture dilemma. It's
mhm,
something that isn't solved one teacher at a time. It's something that's solved at the systems level. So it has to be done in partnership with principals and directors and teacher leaders. And it's about building a culture of coaching. It's about saying that coaching isn't about fixing teachers. Coaching is about all of us all the time trying to become the best versions of ourselves on behalf of students. And so I think that reluctance or resistance needs to be kind of Reed and I always say you don't kind of tackle it head on, you kind of coach around resistance. So you work with others who are willing. You keep connecting with the principal and other leaders in the building to make the coaching work really visible, really prominently kind of saying that it's for everyone. You have teachers kind of go public with some of their coaching work, so it's more of kind of a fishbowl activity, and other teachers can see, hey, this is great, so that the entire culture shifts, and it's not just kind of trying to shift the mindset of one person. It's trying to shift the community, I would say.
mhm. I love it. It's so interesting. Yeah, the coaching around it. That's a lot of conversations, and I I I like that you say, we have to build the culture around it, and some folks may not be so open to it at the beginning, and the goals that, and it's a lot of times I hear it twisted in a way that's not helpful. So it's like, just don't coach them.
No,
Well,
yeah,
and it's like, no, 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 no. This is not about just not coaching people. Just focus on the people that do. No, no, no. And I actually I have a type of coaching that I do, which is human-centered coaching.
right,
And so in my own beliefs and my own experience, and literally what I do on a regular basis is coaching through people's humanity and not around it. There's a reasons a lot of times why folks are resisting change, and that is part of their humanity. And I think one
right.
of the mindsets I'm really working to shift in coaching is resistance to change isn't bad. And Michael Fullen does a lot of work around, I'm sure you know his work around,
Yes,
like, it's actually really helpful stuff to see, like, why are they resisting change, and having very non-judgmental real conversations with people about, what's going on here? Like, why don't you want to adopt this change? Let's talk about it in a really open way.
yeah, right. And I think that coaches and leaders in buildings can kind of model some of the vulnerability that they're hoping teachers come to the table with. And I
Yeah.
think there's small moves like that as leaders that you can make that increase the likelihood that
Mhm.
adults in the building are going to engage in that kind of vulnerable act of engaging in coaching.
Yep, yep. And I wanna say one more thing about resistance. This is
Yeah, please.
I want to hear your thoughts, and then suddenly I'm like, "We opened the can of worms." Adult is one of my major passions. Oh, in my own work, there are so there's different motivations behind resistance, right? And there's different things we can do, strategies to meet those needs around the different motivations. Some of the motivations are systems level issues,
Right.
right? Really tying it to you. Sometimes we are asking teachers to change in a way that feels like, or is actually in, like, it contradicts a school initiative or the school culture. Right. So I think with the STEM initiative rollout, one of the issues was we were asking teachers to teach in an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary way. And the school culture was, you teach math at 9 and you teach reading at 10. Right. And that's like, those literally contradict each other. So I think, a place, and this is something that I have a downloadable a recorded workshop on this too, and it's just, we want to look at what's motivating the change, and how can we meet the needs of that motivation, and it really could be systems level.
Yeah, well said. I think people's motivations and beliefs play a big part in the work. I'm a big fan of the research of Tom Guskey, who's
Mhm.
studied professional learning over
Oh
decades,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, I love, and this is going back some years, but he would always say, it's perennial tension in education. Do we need to change beliefs first in order to affect actions, or sometimes do we need to have people just try it, start with a new action,
Exactly.
then that changes beliefs. And so,
Mhm,
I think it can operate a little differently in different places for different people, but I'm always a fan of saying, just give it a try. Like, let's
mhm,
try something and then see the
mhm,
difference it makes for your students. And
mhm.
often that changes beliefs more than trying to, read an article
Talk
or try to
about it.
even
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah. Mhm,
It's like you need to show them,
mhm.
or you need to show yourself really,
Yeah.
what I think there's also a piece there about resistance. I just wanted to mention that comes back to menus of service. So
Mhm,
oftentimes when we're working with school or district leaders, we say, listen, coaching is for everyone. You need to have this kind of culture right out of the gate and set the culture as building and district leaders that coaching is for everyone. The best of us
mhm,
need to coach, right?
mhm,
That all of the the best sports players, the best, athletes, right? They all have coaches. You never really get to a point where you don't need someone in reflective dialogue kind of helping you, analyze your practice and improve. Um, but not everyone needs the exact same dosage of coaching or
mhm,
activities in coaching. And so I think that's where the menus of service really come in
mhm,
handy,
mhm.
because we can say, everyone's going to be everyone necessarily is doing, a 6 week deep dive coaching cycle, right? The coach can be doing some larger workshops or can be just touching base and saying, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything from me?
Mhm.
So I think that idea of the menu of service helps to explain to school leaders and sometimes to teachers that, everyone's going to be getting coaching, but it's going to look a little different for everyone. And so that you can find your way into coaching work through different doors.
I love it. Do you have any examples that you
Oh
could
yeah.
maybe share, where we could share with the listeners?
Sure,
Is it
sure.
shareable?
We can figure that out. Yeah.
I think that'd be awesome. Okay. All right. We got to wrap up here. This was amazing. Thank you, JC, so much for coming and sharing all of your knowledge. I certainly learned some things too. So I'm going to see you again soon talking about coaching mindsets
Yes.
and your work around that. I'm so excited. Two things that I love. I love coaching. I love mindsets. We're going to talk about both of those together. Yes. I'm so excited.
Well,
So, where, if folks want to know more about you, maybe you want to reach out or, contact you in some way, and learn more about your work, where can they find you?
so we actually have a brand new website for our Center for Ed Leadership. You can certainly find me through there, and some of our work is there. It's edleaderlearning.org. So edleaderlearning.org. You can find us there. And I have one of those names that if you Google it, you will find me. So don't hesitate.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. So thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.